let's begin. So hello everyone and welcome to the Power of Life Diversity Reboot 2024 Summit. My name is Sanmay and I'm incredibly excited and honored to host this session. And in this session, we'll be diving deep into navigating work-life integration challenges. We're going to talk with Levi Campbell from Stryker. And now before we do that, I'm going to fill you in a bit into who Levi is. So she's the director for talent acquisition for Stryker in the Asia Pacific region. She, alongside her team, drives growth by getting the right talent into right roles and continue to provide meaningful careers for outstanding people. Her expertise includes project management, talent acquisition technology and processes, and recruiter onboarding and development. Now, Levi is passionate about helping Stryker to become more diverse and inclusive around the world, and is involved in one of Stryker's ERGs, the Stryker Women's Network, to help continue building a more inclusive workplace. She started her 12 plus years journey in her home country, Canada, and since then she had the opportunity to work in Texas, California, and in Singapore for the past 5 years. And I just cannot wait to introduce you to her and just get to share some of her wonderful knowledge. So Levi, welcome to the stage. We are so happy and we are so honored to have you with us here. Is there anything else you would like our audience to know before we dive into kind of the questions and the meaty segment? So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and for the introduction. I think you covered everything. And I think now I will admit, I think my bio is maybe a bit outdated. That's my fault. I've been in Singapore for almost just over 7 years, which is incredible to think. It's this place I've spent the most consecutive time aside from my hometown. So Singapore is certainly home for me right now. And again, very happy to be here and to have this conversation, something I'm very, very passionate about and looking forward to seeing how I can help.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Levi. All right, so moving on to the Q&A segment. Most people, and the most colloquially thrown around term is work-life balance. But this conversation here is based around work-life integration. So what's the difference, and what do you see as the difference between those two terms? Tell us more.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think there's a place for both in our lives and in the world. But I think of balance almost as like this scale, right, where you've got two options or two things that you're trying to balance, and it's very one or the other, or 50-50, and it's always going to be an equilibrium, and there's really clear guidelines or boundaries between work and life. Whereas integration is, to me, more fluid, more flexible. It's almost more like woven together. I'm a very visual person, so if I start speaking with my hands, that's why. But it's really just more fluid, more flexible. And maybe the boundaries aren't as clear. Boundaries are still needed, but it's much more fluid.
I really love the take, rather than treating them as individual, spheres, you treat them as interwoven fabric, each bleeds into the other, and sometimes works they coexist together. So yeah, that's
coexist. Love that.
Yeah,
yes.
That's a great way of, putting a perspective into that. All right, so moving on, in this age of globalized work environments, how can individuals effectively manage their time and prioritize their tasks to, maintain a balance between their professional responsibilities and, the personal commitments? And how do you envision it in the global work environment that Stryker provides? So what's your take on this?
Yeah. So with this, and I think whether it's a global work environment or one country, one team, one thing that I learned several years ago from a leader was actually to schedule your personal time first, and really think about, So my husband and I do this at the beginning of every year, and we sit down and we look at our calendar for the year, and we're okay, what are there big life milestones? Are there weddings? Are there important personal events that we need to prioritize? Or are there certain things that are, yeah, important to us that we want to make sure we work around? And I know that many of my colleagues do this as well. And we're also in a position where we are just starting our family. So I'm in this conversation at a very interesting time in my professional and personal journey where we didn't have kids. We are about to have a kid. And that's also going to take priority around looking at, okay, now we need to think about what is important for our kids or for our family in a different way. So sitting down and starting with our personal lives and then kind of building around that. So those are the big items, looking at kind of a 1 year out. But we do that quarterly, monthly, and weekly. And when I say we, I'm now getting into myself. My personal preference is always just to recalibrate on what's coming up ahead in the year. And I think planning is absolutely key. Work will always be there, and I love what I do. And I think for me personally, like if I'm not careful, like, I'll just fill my free time with work, because we have such an amazing mission. I love what I get to do every day, but I want to make sure that I'm prioritizing those personal items. So once the kind of personal calendar is built for the year, and then I look at, okay, work wise, what do we have on? And right now we're going through this process of goal setting, priority setting, working with my peers, with my team, and with my manager to understand what are the priorities for the year. When are the big meetings? Are there other projects or other key deadlines that we need to factor in? And then working backwards from those big milestones. So really trying to zoom out at the beginning of every year or quarter, and then kind of planning and then getting a bit deeper and zooming in as we go through. The other piece is just being really clear on what's most important to you personally, and that could be different for everyone. And I think it takes time to figure that out. But understanding, we talked about the work-life integration piece, that might look different at different times in the year, but that's okay. And just knowing and kind of knowing in advance what that might look like and bracing yourself for those busier periods if you need to.
Absolutely. And I really loved, the anecdote that you shared about, at the beginning of the year, kind of taking the time to figure out what are the big things, or big events that need to be accomplished, both in a, personal sense or professional sense, kind of syncing your calendars with maybe your partner or your family members or, people who matter to you the most. That's amazing. Something I'm definitely going to take and implement some version of it in my journey. So thank you so much for that. All right, so Stryker is a global company, and so it operates in multiple locations in multiple countries. So how might your location play a role in how your workplace culture is defined?
This has been, the past 7 years. Actually, no, I would say my entire 13 years at Stryker. Even though for the first two assignments or locations, I was in the US and Canada. Culturally, there were some things very similar, some things different. And then in Asia, of course, the diversity, even within one country, right? You think about India and as one example. So it's hard to generalize to say by location or by country. And I think we're really lucky at Stryker where the culture, the mission, our values, and our purpose are consistent everywhere. And that's one of the things that I've observed. And whether I'm working and living in one location or visiting different offices, is there's that consistency in culture and values, so that it makes it a little bit easier to navigate, perhaps. And we're very lucky to have that. But there still is that cultural nuance of different locations, languages. And I think reading, like when I first moved to Asia, there were a few different books that I read. The Culture Map was recommended to me. That one was really valuable because even in, again, the same company or even within the same country, you still have different styles to work with. You have different communication styles, different ideas of what is considered a fast response. You have different working hours or standard working hours. Some markets start their days earlier than others. Some start their days and end their days later. So, my idea of what an early call is might be absolutely out of the question for another market, or a late call. They're like, oh yeah, no problem. I can do that. That's fine. Whereas another market might say, you know what? No, that's a little bit too late for me. So it's just important to be mindful and aware and take time to be curious and learn and understand. And while there may be generalizations about certain countries or cultures, it's important to still take the time to listen, learn, and understand your peers and who you're working with, because they may have different preferences or different approaches themselves as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can definitely imagine, the difference, in work styles, in the West and in Southeast Asia and India. Yeah, there are, when you've been in Singapore for the past 7 years, as you mentioned, and the initial transition, that might have been, might have been a bit challenging to get to know, the customs and the new rules, and the new meanings to, some of the terms, like, what are work hours, what are the new definitions of some terminologies. So yeah, I can definitely imagine. And my second question kind of, goes a bit deeper into that. How did you manage with the change, and what were the things that kept consistent? So the question is, being someone with extensive experience across diverse workplace cultures. You've worked in Canada, you've worked in the US, now in Singapore. What are some universal principles or practices that you have found helpful in achieving the work-life integration, regardless of the geographical location or the organizational structure?
Yeah. So I'll speak to a few pieces here that you'll see how they relate to the integration piece in a moment. One of the first things, and I think at Stryker especially, is that relationships are so important. Trust as well, and accountability. And knowing that work-life integration, often we think of things like flexibility or different working hours, or having maybe a slightly different, my working day might look different to my peers' working day. But we have a strong relationship, we trust each other, and we always follow through for one another, and we have that accountability. So we know that, well, you may not be online at the exact same time as me, but I know that we're still going to meet our goal together. We're still going to get something done. We're still going to help each other. And again, we have that relationship that's built on trust and a common goal. So having the strong relationships, the trust, and also having accountability and showing that you can deliver positive results, allow that flexibility and that integration to happen more fluidly. And I think that's something that is earned over time, and you build that up over time. But we're in a position now too where, when we come into a team and we know, okay, this team operates pretty flexibly. Here are some of the ground rules, or here are some of the must-dos or meetings that we can't miss, but here are some of the things that we can flex on and try to make sure we're doing for each other to support each other's work-life integration as well. The other piece, I think everyone is human. Most of us have lives outside of work. Some of us love work so much, and we're working 24/7, and that's okay as well. And if that's somebody's personal preference, great. But lots of us have things outside of work that we love to do. And I think taking time to learn about that from your peers or others, and again, just respecting that and knowing that, again, I'm going through this right now where when without kids, my time outside of work is no less valuable than those who may have kids or other caretaking responsibilities or other commitments, and just making sure that, again, globally, I'm pretty sure everybody has hobbies or things that they like to do, or family and people they want to see outside of work. So we're all human, no matter where we are. And I think everyone's different. So like I mentioned, if somebody, wants to spend extra time, or they're spending more time working, or they have a different schedule than you, like, good for them. And that's where I think reserving judgment, right? It's not our place to judge others. It's whatever works for people. And, we want to be mindful, and I'm really mindful of my team too. I'm like, are you okay? Do you have what you need? Like, you seem to be very busy, but if they're good and they're happy and they're healthy, then that's the most important thing. And then the last one is collaboration is key. So I think being open and solution oriented. Sometimes somebody might propose a meeting time that doesn't work for you, or it's just not feasible. So instead of saying no, use the propose new time function in Outlook or whatever calendar or mailing system you use, or collaborate to understand, okay, when is this due? How can I help you meet your deadline? And making sure that there's open dialogue about those timelines and how to get to the best solution. So I think that responsiveness, openness, hey, how can we get this done? The timeline might not work for me right now, but let's figure out how we can still get it done. So those are a few common principles. I would say, regardless of where you are, I hope that people are focusing on relationships and trust, results and accountability, collaboration, and recognizing that we're all human and that we're all different, and that we might need to just adapt to each other's styles a little bit. So it requires some flexibility on our part as well. Practices that I've implemented, calendar management is like the number one thing. So I am super diligent about my calendar. And when I tell people this, they sometimes laugh or roll their eyes, but I literally have blocked, this is like, and it doesn't say sleep in my calendar, but it's blocked for when I'm probably sleeping, my evening blocks, date nights, like my morning gym time, lunchtime, everything. So it's worked really well because it also eliminates a little bit of that back and forth. So when somebody proposes a time and doesn't realize what time zone you're in, especially because I travel a lot, like I'm normally in Singapore, but if I'm in India or if I'm in the US and somebody tries to book a meeting, I'm like, oh, actually, normally that would work, but I'm actually in the US. So by blocking my calendar and just having it all kind of shaded out, it just eliminates a lot of the back and forth and makes us more efficient. And then hopefully people are looking at that and respecting those as well. My team knows they can ping me and say, hey, I see you're blocked. Any chance you're free or flexible during this time? And then we figure it out. Technology as well. Blocking distractions. So like all notifications I have turned off on all of my devices so that I can focus on critical work. I go to the email when I need to check it. My team knows how to reach me if it's urgent, but I go to my distractions. The distractions don't come to me. I'm very easily distracted. But also using it to enable connectivity. So, having the right apps on your phone so that you can do stuff. Like if I have to go to an appointment, I can take care of a couple of quick things while I'm in the car, if it's during hours and my team needs me. The other practice around just geography and time zones, time zone converters. So instead of trying to do the math, or I know there's the app on most phones where you can say, okay, what time zone, how many hours are they ahead of me? There are websites out there where you can actually plug in, like if you're trying to schedule across 5 different cities, you can plug in every individual city and the date, because daylight savings time, I learned this the hard way, is not consistent globally. So make sure if you're planning a meeting for like June, plug it into this calendar and then it'll tell you the times for every location and that date based on the daylight savings time schedule. So that was another lesson learned the hard way. I have a lot of others, but I know we've got other questions to get through.
No worries, absolutely. And I definitely remember one of the incidents that happened with me with daylight saving, because when since I'm primarily based in India, and there were instances when like I remember that my workday starts at 6:30 and I have a call scheduled, and I missed the call because it actually started at 7:30. So yeah, I have some hard memories related to daylight savings. And I absolutely love all the nuggets of wisdom that you shared. One of them, the calendar blocking. And I think, of course, that definitely gives other people the idea about, what time you're available, what time you're not, and, what are the possible slots of connecting with you. And apart from that, I've also found that, blocking time blocking for events, that's a really good task management practice that I use in my day as well. Like if I have 5 tasks, I usually block the calendar, and of course it lets the other people know what I'm prioritizing on this day. And to me also, I know that, okay, this is the time frame that I'm dividing, I'm devoting this particular task to. So thank you so much, Levi, for all of those nuggets of wisdom. It was really descriptive, and I know I love our our users, our audience would love it. All right. So moving on, like we mentioned, like the topic for the thing that we were discussing upon, how do we manage our time, and how do we let others know when we are working in such a distributed global workforce, that okay, these are the times that I'm available, and these are the times we're not. So, and to be honest, in the in the post-COVID era, in the post-COVID era, we have seen the virtual and hybrid workplaces affecting work-life integration. And often, for most people, the work and non-work life kind of leads into each other. So, what tips do you have for separating your work and non-work life when that in line, becomes increasingly blurred, and sometimes, the non-work stuff comes during the work hours, or the work stuff comes during the non-work hours. So how do you manage that? What are some of your tips for that?
Well, I have a few, but one of the really big ones that I thought of after the fact of like, here are all the practical like technologies and things, but it's also about self-discipline. We could have all the technology and all of the tools available. And like I mentioned, notifications, right? I've turned notifications off so that I can focus. Like if I'm in a task, I need to focus on that task, or, I don't want to be sitting there and I'm, making dinner or chatting with my husband, and then, work emails keep dinging on my phone. I only have one phone, admittedly. I know some people have two and they have a physical separation. So I think that's a really great tactic if that works for you. I personally just like carrying one phone, but that's why I've turned the notifications off. But I still have to have the self-discipline to not open my work email. And if I do, I'm also not hard on myself about it. Like if there's nothing else more important happening, then okay, that's fine. Like if I'm sitting there watching TV or something, but it's the self-discipline that it's really big, and just being self-aware, but also not being too hard on yourself. And then if there are things where you're like, I need to be in the moment for this, that phone turned down or phone is physically away, not having your phone out at dinner or when you're with friends or checking on stuff. And if there is something urgent, there are going to be times where it is very time sensitive, and just being upfront with your friends or your family to say, hey, I'm here, I'm present, but this one thing is it's in the back of my mind, or there is something that I just need to, kind of keep an eye on, but I am here, and just communicating openly with whoever you're with or whatever you're doing. Can't necessarily take, I've definitely seen people getting scolded for taking their phones into a yoga class, but if that's the case, like maybe reschedule the yoga class. But otherwise, prioritize that time for yourself and stay disciplined. I mentioned the separate devices. So I do have like a separate laptop, which kind of visually tells me, okay, you know what, you're working on your personal to-do list right now. You don't need to go and worry about checking your emails. I have a separate calendar. So when I go on vacation, so even though everything is calendarized in my Outlook, when I go on vacation, I use my Google Calendar. And that way I'm not looking at even again, visually, I see Outlook, I'm like, ooh, work. I'm not tempted to go and then like maybe check an email. I keep it all in Google and I keep it separate. So you can use cloud platforms even if you don't have separate devices, which again, works for me, might not work for others, but that's something I do. And then I have a designated workspace when working from home. And then I have a bit of a kind of morning and evening kind of opening and closing routine, so to speak, where if there are big tasks or projects, I try to make sure I hit certain deadlines, or I give myself kind of goals to reach during the day. And then I can also have my kind of shut down routine, so to speak. And then last one, sorry, I just remembered, because this just happened. I was just on vacation. If you're going to be out or unavailable, making sure that you're taking time to either hand things over properly, have backup contacts. Very rarely should we be in a situation where we're the only person who can solve something. And quite often it will get solved. The world will go on. We just need to make sure we equip people to handle those situations or take those tasks while we're out.
Absolutely love those. So, in a nutshell, if I had to summarize, make the do not disturb, the DND feature of your phone your best friend. And one of the things that I use, which is, similar to what you just said, keeping notifications off. There's this feature in most of the phones, at least in iPhones, we have different focus modes. So
Yeah.
I set up different focus mode with, a different set of apps. Those are
Yep.
work only apps with a different wallpaper. So, whenever I'm in my work mode, I just set that focus mode on, and, only a few people can get to me. Like my parents, my partner,
Yeah.
and, some of my close friends. And yeah, seeing that visual distinction helps you switch on and off much faster. Like, as you mentioned with Outlook and Google Calendar, when you look at Outlook, let's say, even for your personal tasks, feels like, well, is this work? Am I in a work environment?
Right?
So yeah,
Yeah.
seeing a different UI, seeing a different interface definitely works. And for folks who are using a single device, most browsers have profiles. So, you can set up individual profiles for, your work and your personal tasks. And that way, the links, the bookmarks, they don't mix up, and, you can set up different colors, different aesthetics. So yeah, those are some of the things. So thank you so much, Levi, for, leaning on to that, and giving some wonderful nuggets of wisdom around, keeping your work and non-work separate. All right. Another, like, the next question is basically in lines of this, and it's a personal question, because I'm someone who's based in India, and most of my team is in the US, and most of my meetings are done, during the ET time hours. So for folks like me who are working across, very different time zones, where, the difference is close to 12 hours or so. What are your tips, and, to so that, the work-life integration remains integrated, so to speak?
Yeah. So I think the big one, I mentioned this already, the calendar management and planning, right? And if working across different time zones, right now I'm lucky where I can get most of my day into, we'll say, like a standard day, or like a one block of time. But there have been times where I'm like, okay, I'm going to do 4 hours in the morning, and then I'm going to do 5 hours at night, or kind of
Yeah.
spread it out throughout the day. And I think being flexible and fluid in that, but again, making sure that your calendar reflects that, so that if you're up super early doing calls from like 6 to 10, and then you're like, well, I know I'm going to have to be up back online for a few more things at 2 p.m., blocking out the middle of the day so that you're not just back to back for 12 hours. So again, just that calendar management, and knowing like your work day may look very different, and it may not all be in one, 6, 8, 10 hour block of time. It may be compartmentalized or broken up a little bit. And then the other thing is just, I think, picking. So if you do have those weird hours, or maybe a global call, my team has been awesome about trying to stack everything onto one night. For me, it's morning for them. So we kind of take turns. And my personal preference, I'm like, you know what? Tuesday nights, I call it my night shift. And that's where I have it kind of open in my diary up to a certain point. I don't really go past a certain time. I still want to make sure I'm trying to maintain some decent sleep hygiene. I know that's going to change in about 3 months with a kid, but just picking that one, pick 1 or 2 days, whether it's an evening, a morning, and then people will eventually get to know, okay, Levi prefers to do Tuesdays. Let's see what she's got open. If it's super urgent, then we'll ping her, see if she can flex and do something else. And I'm flexible, so I'll hop on and be like, okay, if it's a 30-minute call, we need to make a decision to move something forward this week, I'll slot it in. I've got other colleagues as well who are like, yep, I'll do any evening, but 6 to 8 is off limit. That's dinner time with family. So it's different for everybody. but I think the consistency helps others when we're thinking about collaboration and planning. I also learned the hard way, don't try to do both where you're like, I'm going to be available from 8 p.m. until 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. until whenever the next morning. So don't try to burn the candle at both ends. I've been on projects where it's necessary, and sometimes you just have to get through a tough week like that. But if you can structure it in a way that at least you're not doing late and early. And then I think the last piece too is like for me, I personally do like a morning message check. So most of my team or peers, my manager is all in the US. So I'll just do kind of a quick scan in the morning when I'm kind of in my morning routine, planning my day out. If there's anything urgent or if there's anything from the team in Australia, I'll quickly check. And again, it's that self-discipline to know that, okay, yes, this email came in, but does it need a response like right this minute? That is, I think early in my career, I was like, everything's urgent. Everything's got to be responded to right away. And yes, it's great because you build a reputation of being responsive, but then you also sit there and respond to emails for an hour and realize I was supposed to go to the gym. And so, so just kind of like really like challenging yourself and where you're spending your energy and still making sure you're taking that time for yourself.
Absolutely. And during this, the time of this conversation, the part that really struck a chord with me was, understanding that your work day might not look, like there's no ideal definition of a work day. It's not 9 to 5, it's not 10 to 6, it's whatever works for you. And, you're the one who defines what your ideal work day looks like. And, in my time working with, working across different time zones, what I've found is, make Loom your best friend. Sometimes, you don't need calls, just record something, record a video and just over communicate over Slack or, over whatever messaging platform that you're using. And as you mentioned, setting clear boundaries. This like 6 to 8 or whatever time, this is my personal time. And, it's mostly off limits. Of course, if there's something as urgent, that requires the time, then, I'm all in for it. But yeah, having some semblance of a boundary definitely helps, keep things in check. So thank you so much, Levi, for that. All right, so moving on, into this communication, leaning on to the bit of communication. So at Power of Life, we find that communication is invaluable when it comes to this topic of work-life integration. And what role do you see communication playing in work-life integration? And what tips can you share for establishing clear communication and clear boundaries? Because it's easier said than done. That, okay, I'm not available during this block, but how do you effectively communicate that?
Yeah. I will start with, well, I guess what our team does every day is interview people. But I think even in the interview process, as you're exploring opportunities, or maybe it's within the same company and it's a change in team, a change in job or responsibility or location, understanding what the dynamics and expectations are, and knowing that that may be different than what you're used to and will require some change and adaptation. So I think expressing your interest and dedication to the project, the role, the opportunity. It may also be like a stretch assignment that you're considering. And this could sound something like, I'm really excited to come in, learn, and make an impact. I know it may require, travel or, different hours than normal, which I'm fully prepared to do. But I would love to understand more about work-life integration in your team, or how you approach work-life integration and what I can expect coming in. Because at the end of the day, we want to bring our best selves to work every day. We want to be ourselves, and we want to stay healthy for many reasons. And I think asking about it during an interview process or as you're taking on new work, still, again, expressing the interest, the commitment, and the dedication that you're going to have. But yeah, just getting a clear sense for it from the very beginning. So that's one. And then knowing too, because that helps you decide, like, is this the right environment? Is this the right team? Is this manager have a similar philosophy to approaching work-life integration? Because if there is not alignment there, that might cause friction down the road. That hopefully we're all learning that work-life integration is critical, and that everybody is different and needs different things. The next one is, I think, something that I've really valued, is my manager is very open in talking about it. So on one hand, if you are a manager, I think having an open conversation and tabling that with team members, but also being honest. If your manager asks you, how are you doing? How's the workload? Or how are the hours? Or I've noticed you've been on calls 4 nights this week. Be honest. And if it's too much, or if it's like, you know what, I don't mind being on a late call, but yeah, 4 nights a week is getting to be a lot. Is there anything we can do to shift it? Or could we record this one? And I think just being honest and knowing that, again, we're human, and if the manager is asking, they care. And I think that's the other thing, is pick a place and a team that cares and is caring and respectful of our individuality and our needs outside of the workplace as well. So I think having open conversations, transparent conversations with your manager, because they can also help to back you up. There's been cases too where someone proposes a time, my manager might hop in, and before I can say, oh, you know what, can we try for Tuesday next week? My manager will hop in and say, actually, you know what, can we try for Tuesday next week? Because that's, when Levi tries to do her night calls. So having advocates or peers that are aware of your boundaries or your preferences is great. And then I think just reviewing and reflecting what worked for me 1 year ago, maybe it's shifted. Maybe there's a different project, different priority. Something is coming up in my personal life. So with my, our upcoming family expansion here, I've had to, I've gracefully kind of stepped down from a couple of different projects or things that I really, really love. But right now it's a different time in my life, and I need to shift where my focus is. So my team knows that I'm still 1,000% dedicated to their success. But there's some of these extracurriculars or stretch activities that I just need to step back from for a few months while I figure out how to become a mom, which is okay. And I know that those opportunities will present themselves again later. So I think just, again, being open to say, I'm still really committed and passionate about X, Y, Z, but I just need to shift where my focus is right now. That's okay.
Thank you so much, Levi. Thank you so much for, a detailed, lens into how to keep those communication channels open, how to ask for help when needed. And yeah, so we are almost at time now. So Levi,
Okay.
for all of our audience who want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach out to you? And yeah, tell us more about that.
Sure. So probably the easiest way is to find me on LinkedIn. I will say as well, because being in recruitment, we get a lot of messages. So if you can reference Power to Fly, or that you attended the summit in some way, that way it just helps me to differentiate and know how we came to be connected. That would be fantastic. So yeah, LinkedIn is probably the easiest place to start.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Levi, for walking us through this amazing topic of work-life integration, and giving us so many nuggets of wisdom on how to navigate this new maze of hybrid/remote/global workforce. Thank you so much for this, and we look forward to having you again on this podium someday. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for accommodating in a virtual setting. I know it's a little bit different, but it's been my pleasure. And again, something I'm very passionate about. I'm still learning. I don't have it all figured out. I'm going to have to figure it out again in 3 months. But yeah, happy to be here. And I hope the rest of the event goes well.
Thank you so much.